Welcome to the Overflow Worship Podcast, where we serve and support leaders so you can serve and support your local church.
Hey everybody, welcome to the very first podcast of 2023, the Overflow Worship Podcast that is. I am your host, once again, Andrea Olson. Welcome and Happy New Year. I'm so glad that you're here. And to all of our new listeners, welcome. I'm really honored that you decided to take the time to tune in today. So it's the new year, and it comes with a lot of feelings, a lot of emotions, a lot of things, right? It's exciting, it feels fresh, it feels new, but it also feels a little bit overwhelming. And maybe I'm the only one who feels that way, but I kind of doubt it, where there's this little twinge of overwhelm, right? Because it's like, okay, I got to fix all the things I messed up last year and do better this year. And that's kind of what our culture has turned January into. And it's not all bad, but I want to help you with that a little bit and hopefully maybe shift the perspective a little bit. So if you are feeling overwhelmed, by the end of today's episode, you will feel less overwhelmed, okay? So first of all, January in our culture and our society is all about goal setting, right? Like, I'm going to do all of these things. I'm going to get healthy. I'm going to eat right. I'm going to manage my time better. I'm going to spend more time doing this and less time doing that. And, that's good, but it also sometimes sets us up for failure because we make this really long, exhaustive list, and then it becomes exhausting because it's impossible to attain it. It's like I don't know. I'll speak for me. I make these lists that, assume that a person has 48 hours in a day. And clearly, obviously we don't. Everybody has the same 24 hours. And so something has to give, right? And so I want to give you two things to think about today. All right? Two things. And most of our listeners are worship leaders, worship pastors, or worship team members. If you're not, you are still welcome here. We love having you here, and I'm so glad that you are. But for most of you, that's probably your role, is some sort of a worship role, whether you're volunteer or you're paid. That's the role that you serve in. And so I want to talk to you about a little bit about goal setting. So for your team, it is really important that you point your team in a direction, right? Show them the target and tell them how you're going to get there, right? But the problem with that is when we have too many things, right? Like I said just a minute or two ago, when there's too many things, we get overwhelmed, and we can also overwhelm our team, right? Your job as the leader is to make sure that your goals are measurable, they're attainable, right? And that they're not super overwhelming. They need to be something that they can grab onto and simple, okay? So that's also going to help you, because if you set so many goals that are just kind of off all in different directions and lots of different micro goals, we need to have those too. But sometimes we can get lost in that. I know I can. And so what I want to share with you is this. I challenge you this month to kind of go against the grain of the norm of our culture, where we are setting all these hundreds of goals in absolutely every area of our lives. Okay, so let's just focus on your role as a worship leader, okay? So this is where we're going to park for a minute. I challenge you this month to spend time in prayer before the Lord and ask Him, what is the one thing that you want me to focus on this year? What's the one thing? Okay. And that doesn't mean you won't do anything else, but that can serve as a filter for everything else. Okay. Like, God, what is my filter? So let me give you an example. This last October, we had our Overflow Worship Conference, our in-person conference in Wilmer, Minnesota, for worship leaders and their teams, and it was always such a sweet time. And side note, mark your calendars, because October 2023 is, coming. And we are always the second weekend in October, and this year's number 10. So we're going to have some pretty awesome stuff happening. So you're going to want to be there. I guarantee it. Anyways, okay, after the last conference, I sat down and I was praying about this upcoming 2023 conference. And I really felt the Lord prompting me to pray something very specific about this next year. And that thing was, God, who needs this conference next year. Bring those people into our path. Bring those people to mind, whether that's the artists and the guests that we bring in or the people who attend. And within that prayer, I begin to pray like, Lord, what do those people need, right? So then there's this broader prayer of like, what's the one thing that they need to hear from us this year? And that's been my prayer is, what is that one thing? What is that one thing? And so I encourage you to go before the Lord this month. And rather than getting lost in all of the details of the goal setting, which I know it has to happen, especially if you're on a staff where, you're going to sit down and set your quarterly goals and all of that. And those are good things, but you need a filter. So go before the Lord and ask him, what is the one thing that you want us to focus on this year? What does our community need? What does our context need? How can I serve this community best, right? So once you come with that one thing, that's going to serve as a filter for everything else. So then you can set those micro goals because you have a filter for it. And then you might say like, ooh, that goal's not for this year. Okay. So for example, let's say you set a goal for growing your worship team. Right? Like we want to grow as a team. We want to grow in numbers. We want more people on the team, right? Okay. So you want more people. Well, maybe then if you have a goal of also, in like growing the skill level of your team, maybe that can't happen this year, because you're actually focusing on just getting people in the door. That doesn't mean that you throw skill out the window, but maybe you're not having those, quarterly workshops that you wanted to have because you're focusing your extra time and energy on cultivating these new team members and growing as a community. Okay. So that's just an example, but go before the Lord, ask him the one thing, okay? So that's the first step. That is the thing that I challenge you to sit down and really pray about this month and keep track of all of it. Write it down, get a journal, get a planner, whatever you need to do, and write it down. We are going to take a quick pause from today's episode because I have a free gift for you. Leading worship is a big deal. And as much as the responsibility thrills you, it also can be a little daunting, right? And I know because I've been there. As someone who's led worship for more than 20 years, I know how stressful prepping for the weekend set can be because let's face it, Sunday's always coming. So I've developed a checklist that I go through every single time I'm preparing a set list for an upcoming service, and it really helps a lot. I feel confident, I feel prepared, it saves me time because let's face it, whether you're paid or volunteer, you're probably spending precious evening time working because you're just trying to fit it all in. And so this helps you work smart and saves you time. And most importantly, it just helps me make sure that nothing falls through the cracks. It's helped me for 20 years and I'm giving it to you for free. So click the link in the show notes or head on over to overflowworship.com/setlist-checklist to get yours today. All right, back to today's episode. I have been dwelling on this scripture a lot lately, Ephesians 1, verse 18. And I love the way the King James Version says it. It says, let the eyes of your understanding be enlightened. The eyes of your understanding be enlightened. And then if you go to the NIV, it says, I pray that the eyes of your heart may be enlightened. And then it goes on to say, in order that you may know the hope to which he has called you, the riches of his glorious inheritance in his holy people, and on to 19, and his incomparably great power for us who believe. The eyes of your heart, the eyes of your understanding be enlightened. And I pray that over you, and I challenge you to take that verse and pray it over this process. God, let the eyes of my understanding be enlightened. Help me to see what you want me to see and guide me to the one thing that you want me to focus on this year. And don't let that be pressure filled. I guess I could see where it would be because I would tend to lean that way where I'm like, oh no, I only get one thing. But that's not what this is meant to be. It's not meant to be pressure filled. It's meant to be freeing because it gives you permission to really put your energy, time, and focus on that thing and do it well, because everything that falls underneath it is going to support that. And this is all assuming that you have set, mission, vision, and values for your organization, because that helps keep you in line as well, right? Like you're not going to pick your one thing that's outside of alignment with all of those things. So I challenge you to go back to a previous episode where I shared a webinar that I did on the 5 ministry must-haves for growing and managing your worship team. It's episode 87. It released on December 12th. But if you're curious about mission, vision, and values, I talk a little bit more about that in that episode. So go back, check that out as well. And we can link that in the show notes for you so that you can easily just click and get right to it. So praying that over you, and I challenge you to pray that verse, Ephesians 1:18, that the eyes of your understanding would be enlightened and that God would show you that one thing. Okay? So then here is the support to that. Okay? There's one other thing that I want to share with you to support that and help you as you're navigating through this season of goal setting and prepping for the exciting year ahead. It's going to be a great year. It is. It's exciting. And I'm excited for you and the ministry that God has called you to. So I don't know if any of you out there are fans of Andy Stanley, but I personally have been very encouraged and challenged by his teachings and his books. And he has this concept that he created called the best question ever. He talks about it in several sermon series and podcasts. And also he wrote a book about it called Ask It. And I encourage you to check that book out. It's a really great book. But the question is this: in light of past experiences, present circumstances, and future hopes and dreams, what is the wise thing to do? Well, if you think about that one thing, if you're struggling with clarity about that one thing, ask that question. Okay. In light of past experiences. Okay. Think through the last 2 or 3 years. Have they been easy? No, they have not. They have been very challenging for pretty much everybody across the globe. Specifically in regards to churches and worship ministry, it's also been very difficult. You've maybe lost team members who have decided, that they don't want to serve anymore, or it's not right for their season, or they're not coming back to church. And those are all really difficult things. And you might be dealing with a team that is much smaller than it used to be. So in light of past experiences, well, we can't operate the way we used to. And that is a fact. But thinking through your context, your ministry, and your life as a worship leader, think through the past, okay? Then, and present circumstances, okay, where are you guys at now? What are the things that you're facing? What are the challenges you're facing? What are the joys that you have? What are the strengths that your team has, right? And then also, and future hopes and dreams, okay? Think through the future goals of the church. What are the mission, vision, and values of the church? Where's the church headed? And then where is the worship team headed? Your future hopes and dreams. Okay, with all of those things in mind, what's the wise thing to do when you're when you're deciding on this one thing for the year? So hopefully that question helps serve as a filter for you. It kind of hones it down, because it's not like, oh, wow, I could choose any one thing in the whole wide world. And that's really super overwhelming, because you can't narrow that down, right? No. In light of past experiences, present circumstances, and future hopes and dreams, what is the wise thing to do when thinking through this one thing? What's the wise one thing to choose? Okay. So taking all of those things into consideration, your context, your people, your history, your current status, all of that. And hopefully that helps you as you are navigating through figuring out where you want to put your focus this year. So as I wrap this podcast up, I just want to encourage you once again with Ephesians 1:18, that the eyes of your understanding would be enlightened. I pray that God would give you peace, that he would give you wisdom, that he would give you guidance as you navigate through the early phases of this new year. And I pray that he would give you joy. Sometimes New Year's are overwhelming and not a very joyful time. And others, you feel like it's a clean slate and you feel really fresh and new. Wherever you find yourself on that spectrum, I pray that you feel God's joy in this new season, and that you would remember that He does have something good for you. He has something powerful for you, and that you are more than your job. Right? Your identity is not your job. Who you are is not worship leader. It's what you do. And you do it well, but that's not the only thing that you do, and it doesn't define who you are. So, you are also spouse and maybe parent and friend, and, you're a son or a daughter, you're a brother or a sister, right? And you're a lot more than worship leader. However, being a worship leader is a huge job. And sometimes it's daunting, sometimes it's wonderful, sometimes it's overwhelming, and everything in between. But I pray that you have the joy of the Lord and that you feel His peace and wisdom as you navigate through your plans for this year. And I just am grateful to be on this journey with you. So as I wrap up this episode, I just want to thank you. Thank you for being a part of the Overflow Worship community. We are here for you to serve and support you. We want to see you lead from the overflow, not the overwhelm. So I encourage you with that today. Go find your one thing and ask that question in light of past experiences, present circumstances, and future hopes and dreams. What's the wise thing to do? We've got all that stuff, the book, and everything else I mentioned linked in the show notes. And until next time, be blessed. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Overflow Worship Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please hit subscribe so you never miss another one. And we would be so grateful if you would leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts. Tell us what you love about the podcast, because your reviews truly do help us reach more people. And don't forget, we have a free gift for you. My checklist for planning a successful set list every single time is yours for free. Just visit overflowworship.com/setlist checklist. Once again, thank you so much for listening.